If Europe wants to avoid war, Europe must get ready for war. And Denmark is acutely aware of its own security and threats, not least because of its unique strategic geography, but also because of recent events. I'm, of course, talking about the ongoing war in Ukraine and conflicts in other theaters, but also the repeated and continued attacks on critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. And, of course, the ongoing competition for influence in the Arctic region, including Greenland. And to all the people of Greenland and of Denmark as a whole, I want to be very clear that Europe will always stand for sovereignty and territorial integrity. And it is against this complex backdrop that I salute the Prime Minister's decision to increase defence spending to 3% of GDP in the next 2 years. This, dear Mette, is true leadership. Dear cadets, if we look back over each generation of cadets who have graduated from this institution, they have faced their own challenges. For those in the post-war years, it was about fighting their way in that dangerous time. And it is exactly on this day in March 1948 that Denmark stationed naval assets on your islands of, I hope I pronounce them well, Anholt, Læsø and Samsø. And it was done because of very real fears of an imminent attack from the east. These events ultimately led to Denmark's historic decision to join NATO the following year. And being part of NATO meant that for generations that followed, their duty was also about protecting peace across the world and help secure our own freedoms. But somewhere along the line, the era of the peace dividend gradually set in. The idea took hold that spending on defense should be ramped up during conflict times, but should just as quickly be driven down in times of relative peace. And with the help of NATO and the Transatlantic Alliance, these times of relative peace seemed to be a permanent state. The truth is, we quickly convinced each other that this truly exceptional period that saw the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall come down and entire nations and people set free was a norm. And this led to underinvestment in defense and, frankly, to overcomplacency. Our adversaries used that time not only to remobilize, but also to challenge the rules that govern global security. And that brings us to today. The era of the peace dividend is long gone. The security architecture that we relied on can no longer be taken for granted. The age of spheres of influence and power competition is well and truly back. Just take Russia. We already know its determination to deny other countries their right to choose their own path. And now Russia is on an irreversible path to creating a pure war economy. It has massively expanded its military-industrial production capacity. 40% of the federal budget is spent on defense, 9% of its GDP. And this investment fuels its war of aggression in Ukraine while preparing it for future confrontation with European democracies. And just as these threats increase, we see our oldest partner, the United States, move their focus to the Indo-Pacific. Dear cadets, we may wish these things were not true, or that we did not have to say them so bluntly. But now is the time to speak honestly, so that every European understands what is at stake. Because the discomfort of hearing these words pales into insignificance with the pain of war. Just ask the soldiers and the people of Ukraine. The point is that we must see the world as it is, and we must act immediately to face up to it. Because a new international order will be formed in the second half of this decade and beyond. So as we stand here today, Europe faces a fundamental choice about its future. Do we keep reacting to each challenge in an incremental and cautious way? Or are we ready to grasp this opportunity to build a more secure Europe, one that is prosperous, free and ready, willing and able to defend itself? Dear cadets, the answer is clear. The choice is none. Europe is ready to step up. We are ready to take control of the change that is inevitable. Because we cannot afford to be pushed around by history. And that means acting now is a must. Acting big is a conditio sine qua non for speed, scale and strength by 2030. This is what Denmark is doing. This is what others are doing. This is what Germany is deciding on today. And these decisions are both historic and necessary. By 2030, Europe must have a strong European defense posture. Readiness 2030 means to have rearmed and developed the capabilities to have credible deterrence. Readiness 2030 means to have a defense industrial base that is a strategic advantage. But to be 2030 ready, we must move now. And that is where the European Union comes in. To be very clear, Member States will always retain responsibility for their own troops, from doctrine to deployment, and of course for the definition of the requirements of their armed forces. But there is a lot that is needed at European level